Did you know Clark Gable was famous for having bad breath, and Errol Flynn never took care of his personal grooming, and Charles Llton used to take showers once a month? That's not all. There were many other Golden Age actors who had extremely bad hygiene habits. They were sometimes stinky, and people did not want to work with them, but they were just helpless. Here is a list of old Hollywood actors who were extremely popular for being unhygienic in nature. Clark Gable. There's this old Hollywood rumor that Clark Gable didn't exactly smell like roses on set. Back in the day, word got around that his breath was pretty rough. A lot of it started with whispers among the crew when he was filming those intimate scenes in Gone with the Wind. Vivien Leigh, who had to kiss him, supposedly brought it up more than once, and those quiet complaints spread like wildfire behind the scenes. Over time, people kept passing the story along, first in hushed conversations, then in little anecdotes that popped up in memoirs. It was never a big headline, nobody ran to the press back then, but insiders chatted, and that's how the rest of us found out. The root of the problem started years earlier. He'd lost a bunch of his teeth and wore dentures, which weren't exactly top of the line by today's standards. Dental care wasn't as advanced, and these replacements didn't fit right. That caused some serious odor issues. The exact moment it went from a private annoyance to a known bit of gossip is hard to pin down, but it's pretty certain it got its biggest boost during that massive blockbuster shoot. Ever since, it's been one of those Hollywood legends that stuck. It's not something his studio would ever admit, and it definitely wasn't printed in the fan magazines at the time. But the folks who knew him and who worked on set passed the word along. That's how it survived all these years. It might sound harsh, but it's just one more example of how these old Hollywood myths get started and never really go away. Errol Flynn. He didn't look anything like the rugged hero everyone knew from the silver screen when he turned up in Vancouver late in his life. By then, he was bloated and unkempt. It shocked a lot of people. Those who saw him remembered the scruffy stubble, the disheveled hair, the worn-out clothes. They whispered about how he barely bothered to bathe. Some claimed he thought frequent washing was too fussy, maybe even a bit unmanly. These stories didn't really emerge while he was alive. The studios were masters at keeping a star's image polished and pretty. But years after he passed, tales of his personal habits started spilling out. They showed up in tell-all books, written by former friends and employees, and in late-in-life interviews from people who had crossed paths with him behind the scenes. They'd talk about the smell, the stains, and the way he seemed to care so little about keeping himself tidy. By the time these inside stories went public, he wasn't around to defend himself. It happened decades after his death, when his name popped up again in biographies and documentaries. Some folks connected the timing to his work on those last low-budget projects he took in his final years. Around the time he wrapped Cuban Rebel Girls, his health was already failing, and he was often drifting from one seedy late-night scene to another. The press never reported it back then. They were too busy selling the legend. But once the decades passed, nothing stopped old acquaintances from finally sharing what they remembered. His wild partying, that night in Vancouver, the casual attitude toward hygiene, and the shock of seeing a star reduced to a man who barely resembled the hero on the screen. Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow was popular for having really bad smell. Many think it was due to chronic health issues, particularly her battle with kidney disease, which was specifically nephritis. Nephritis impaired her kidneys' ability to filter waste, leading to a buildup of toxins like urea in her body. This condition can cause the body to emit a distinct and unpleasant smell, resembling ammonia or urine. In an era with limited medical understanding and treatment options for kidney disease, Jean struggled to manage her symptoms. The demanding nature of her acting career, including long hours on set, and the stress of maintaining her public image, exacerbated her condition. The combination of excessive sweating from studio lights and the inability to effectively control the uremic odor made it noticeable to those close to her, such as co-stars and makeup artists. Despite her efforts to mask the smell with heavy perfumes and frequent bathing, the odor persisted, fueling Hollywood gossip. Studio executives at MGM were aware of the rumors and took extensive measures to protect Jean's pristine public image. They orchestrated positive media coverage and managed her appearances meticulously to divert attention from any negative gossip. While Jean Harlow maintained her charm and professionalism on screen, the persistent rumors about her body odor were a tragic consequence of her unmanaged health struggles, highlighting the often unseen personal battles faced by Hollywood stars during its golden age. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe was one of the most beautiful and glamorous celebrities in the history of American pop culture. However, her life was anything but glamorous, and I'm not talking about the dark forces in her life that led to her death. I'm talking about her hygiene, which was allegedly so bad that it drove several of her maids to quit working for her. She didn't bathe regularly. And they could be lazy when it came to placing dirty dishes in their right place, and even dirty soiled clothes everywhere. Allegedly, Monroe would frequently go about her house in soiled clothes, and had huge piles of dirty dishes in her bedroom. It was even reported that when she was full, she would scrape her leftover food under her bedsheets, sleep on top of it, and leave it for her maids to clean up. In addition to that, she even had people like Gable refuse to date her due to her hygiene. According to his biographer David Brett, Monroe was flatulent, dirty, and ate in bed. Like Jean Harlow, she bleached all her pubic hair and never wore panties. She suffered from what today would be described as irritable bowel syndrome. She rarely bathed, slept in the nude, and ate a lot in bed, shoving what was left on her plate under the sheets before going to sleep. Of course, most of this stuff is hearsay. There is some truth to the rumor. I hardly believe that she was as big of a slob as she is made out to be. Her unsavory hygienic habits, if they existed, likely came about as a coping mechanism for her anxiety and depression. Charles Llton. He didn't get talked about as much as some of the bigger names, but now and then whispers floated around about the way he carried himself off camera. He wasn't known for any grand scandals in this department, but a few people who'd worked alongside him would mention it in passing, something about not always being as squeaky clean as the roles he played. These hints slipped out long after he'd made his mark on the screen. They appeared in scattered memoirs and late-in-life interviews, stuff that bubbled up when the old Hollywood guard finally started sharing behind-the-scenes secrets. Unlike the bigger names who got called out for their lack of personal care, he remained more of a quiet footnote in the rumor mill. Scotty Bowers remembered the evening well. Charles Llton had arrived at a cocktail party straight from a film shoot, still wearing the heavy makeup designed for his character role. It was a curious sight, glamour mixed with neglect, as though Llton had stepped off the set and strolled right past the dressing room mirror. 4 days later, at another gathering, Bowers noticed something odd. Llton looked exactly the same, right down to the thick pancake makeup on his face. Bowers approached, trying to be as subtle as possible. "Charles," he said gently, "are you still working on that film?" "No, dear boy. Why do you ask?" Llton replied, raising one eyebrow, a hint of mischief dancing in his eyes. Bowers, choosing his words carefully, said, "You still have your makeup on." With a calm disdain, as if appraising a less enlightened student, Llton merely smiled. "Most observant of you, dear boy," he said, the faintest curl at the corner of his mouth suggesting he knew exactly what he was doing. Then, without further explanation, he turned on his heel and headed back toward the bar, leaving Bowers to wonder if Llton wore that old grease paint out of forgetfulness, defiance, or something else entirely. It never caused a media storm, and there's no famous film production or high-profile event linked directly to this talk. This was a different time, when a star's image stayed tightly managed and unflattering details didn't make headline news. Decades later, when people started writing honest accounts of classic Hollywood, these small, offhand comments found their way into the narrative. Frances Farmer. Frances Farmer's story is one of the great Hollywood tragedies, an actress with raw talent who fought the system and paid a heavy price. Tales of her personal life, including her grooming habits, emerged decades after her peak. In her later years, as her mental health deteriorated and her relationship with Hollywood fractured, people who encountered her behind the scenes recalled someone who didn't give a second thought to a daily bath or a fresh change of clothes. They said she could show up on set or at rehearsals looking disheveled, smelling like someone who'd slept in the same outfit for days. Understandably, none of this was front-page news at the time, given the stigma and silence around mental health and personal struggles. It was only much later, in the telling and retelling of Farmer's troubled life, through memoirs, interviews, and eventually documentaries, that these quiet comments came to light. Rather than gossip meant to tarnish her image, these details painted a painful human portrait of an actress who was overwhelmed by an industry and era that offered her little understanding or compassion. Wallace Beery. He never had the polished leading man vibe like Gable or Flynn, but Wallace Beery was a big presence in the 30s and 40s. Known for playing tough, often grumpy characters, he apparently carried a bit of that rough-around-the-edges approach into his off-screen habits. A few old-timers from the lot would later mention, very quietly, that after a long day's shoot, you'd know Beery was around before you even saw him. Not that he was downright filthy, just not one for overdoing the soap and water. He wasn't a headline maker for his hygiene, so nobody tried to blow the lid off at the time. But after the years rolled on and people loosened up, a few old crew members remembered Beery as a man who sometimes brought his on-screen gruffness, scent and all, right into real life. Clara Bow. Clara Bow, the it girl of the 1920s, was the very embodiment of flapper-era glamour on screen. Off-camera, though, her life was chaotic. Burdened by personal struggles, a rough childhood, and overwhelming fame, Bow reportedly let some basic routines slide, hygiene included. Unlike the squeaky clean image that fan magazines loved to print, the star at home might have looked and smelled a bit less polished. People close to her later hinted that with all the stress and emotional turmoil, keeping up a perfect appearance wasn't always top priority. The studios did everything they could to keep this under wraps back then, and these stories mostly stayed hidden until personal memoirs, old letters, and quiet interviews dug them up. By the time the truth trickled out, Bow was already a legend of a bygone era, and the details of her hygiene habits became one more layer in a complex, tragic portrait of a star who shined brighter on screen than off. W.C. Fields. W.C. Fields' trademark nasal drawl and comically boozy demeanor on screen didn't come out of thin air. He was a notorious drinker off camera too, and that lifestyle had a way of leaving its mark, especially in close quarters. Nights of heavy drinking combined with not exactly jumping in the shower at the crack of dawn made for a less than pleasant aroma. By some accounts, stepping onto set next to Fields wasn't always easy on the senses. These weren't headline stories, of course. The studios had a vested interest in protecting their star comedians from ridicule. Only when old Hollywood veterans started talking decades later did these boozy, smelly whispers surface. They painted a picture of a funny man who never really bothered to freshen up after last night's liquid party. Tallulah Bankhead. Tallulah Bankhead was known for her outrageous behavior, sharp wit, and no-holds-barred approach to life. She broke a lot of rules for women in that era, both on and off the screen. Among the more whispered-about aspects of her personality was an attitude toward personal hygiene that raised a few eyebrows. Some old stories claim she considered regular bathing and routine grooming as overly fussy or downright boring, preferring to spend her time partying, drinking, or socializing into the early morning hours. Unlike male stars, whose reputations might get gently teased over time, Bankhead was a boundary pusher who didn't play by conventional standards. Long after her heyday, when aging Hollywood insiders and former acquaintances finally started speaking their minds, they let slip that you could sometimes catch a certain odor hanging around her dressing room. Studios never blared this in the press, of course. A larger-than-life figure like Bankhead always got a protective gloss in the public eye. But once people felt free to open up about the old days, these little tidbits emerged, adding depth and a whiff of reality to her already wild legend. John Barrymore. John Barrymore's decline from stage and screen titan to troubled has-been is well documented. Late in life, he was no stranger to a drink or three or a dozen, and that sort of schedule doesn't exactly inspire careful grooming. Some who worked with him near the end remembered a kind of sad transformation. The once great leading man, now looking a bit disheveled and smelling less than fresh. Again, Nobody dared breathe a word of it while he was alive, not in the press anyway. But when old producers, stagehands, and writers eventually spoke up in memoirs or interviews, they let slip that Barrymore's legendary charm had faded, along with his attention to basic hygiene. To them, it was one of many tragic signs that a star once at the top of his game was slipping away. Peter Lorre. Peter Lorre's unforgettable voice and haunting eyes earned him iconic roles in classics like M and Casablanca. But once you got past that unique screen persona, people who worked with him sometimes mentioned a different, more pungent aura. He smoked like a chimney, and the smell of stale tobacco seemed to cling to him like an old coat he wouldn't take off. Add to that the stress and health problems he faced, and you can guess he wasn't always jumping in the shower first thing. Nobody was screaming this from the rooftops. Lorre was well-liked and respected for his talent. But dig into a few obscure interviews and forgotten memoirs, and you'll find subtle hints that standing too close to him during a long shoot could be an exercise in holding your breath. Leo G. Carroll. He's not the kind of name you hear alongside the big stars of yesteryear, but Leo G. Carroll was one of those dependable character actors you'd spot in classics like Rebecca or North by Northwest. People say he brought a certain refinement to his roles, but behind the scenes, a handful of set veterans quietly recalled that sometimes that refinement didn't carry over into the hygiene department. It's not that he was a total slob, just that he might show up looking a bit worn in, smelling like a guy who skipped a shower or two. It was never big news. Nobody wrote scathing columns about it. But when the old Hollywood crowd started telling all those small stories that never made it to Variety or The Hollywood Reporter, Carroll's name popped up in passing. Just one more reminder that even in an era of high-gloss perfection, some stars were more human and smellier than their polished images let on. Spencer Tracy. Stories about Tracy's hygiene didn't surface during his heyday. The studios were experts at maintaining his spotless image, ensuring that any negative details stayed hidden from the public eye. It wasn't until years after his passing that tales began to emerge, shared quietly in memoirs and interviews by those who had worked closely with him. One such story comes from a former Sethand who recalled working with Tracy on the set of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Spencer was always so focused on his craft, the crew member said. He'd spend hours perfecting his lines and getting into character, but when it came to personal grooming, he didn't always prioritize it. There were days when he'd skip a shower or forget to change his clothes after a long shoot. It wasn't something anyone talked about openly, but those of us on set noticed. Another anecdote comes from a makeup artist who worked with Tracy during the filming of Woman of the Year. Tracy was meticulous about his makeup for the camera, making sure every detail was just right, she shared. Off-set, though, he could be a bit lax. There were times when his hair was a mess, and he didn't seem to mind the smell lingering from a long day's work. It wasn't disrespectful or anything, just his way of handling the pressures of constant filming. These stories, while not as widely publicized as those of some of his contemporaries, paint a fuller picture of Spencer Tracy, the dedicated actor who sometimes let his personal habits slip in the midst of Hollywood's demanding environment. It's important to remember that these accounts come from personal recollections and aren't extensively documented. They offer a glimpse into the everyday realities behind the glamorous facade of classic Hollywood stars. It's not just old actors. Currently, new actors from Hollywood are said to have really bad hygiene. Some of your favorites are also on this list. Keep watching to find out which of the latest actors are considered really smelly. Cameron Diaz. Most celebrities who are notorious for their natural scents often dodge deodorant, blaming it for more harm than good. But Cameron Diaz flips the script entirely. Unlike her peers, Diaz confidently claims that avoiding antiperspirant is the secret to her freshness. She believes that antiperspirants trap odors instead of letting her body breathe. Sure, skipping them might mean a few pit stains here and there, but Diaz stands by her choice. As long as I keep my armpit hair trimmed, I don't have anything to worry about, she says. It's a bold stance in a world obsessed with smelling perfect, but Diaz seems to embrace her natural aroma with ease. Jessica Simpson. When you think of personal hygiene slip-ups, It's not always about skipping showers or deodorant. Sometimes, it's about the little habits we overlook. Take Jessica Simpson, for example. The former pop star once admitted to Ellen DeGeneres that she avoids brushing her teeth whenever possible. Her reasoning? Her teeth are so white and her breath is always fresh, making brushing feel unnecessary. While Simpson acknowledges that not brushing regularly might not be the best habit, she does make up for it by flossing and using mouthwash. It's a partial solution, but one wonders if this might catch up with her in the long run. Regardless, Simpson's candidness adds another layer to her multifaceted persona. Gwyneth Paltrow. Gwyneth Paltrow's last appearance at the Met Gala stirred up more than just fashion conversations. Reports emerged that some attendees found her scent a bit overpowering. The National Enquirer noted that several guests tried discreetly wafting away her aroma during the event, leaving Paltrow seemingly unaware of their discomfort. Later, a friend of Paltrow suggested that her strong scent was likely due to experimenting with new deodorants. Paltrow, concerned about the potential cancer risks of aluminum-based products, was testing out alternatives. As her friend pointed out, not all of these new options were successful, leading to those memorable moments at the gala. Kesha. Kesha burst onto the music scene as a true wild child, known for her rebellious spirit and outrageous antics. During the filming of her documentary series, Kesha, My Crazy Beautiful Life, she took her rebelliousness to another level by reportedly drinking her own waste, a stunt she later regretted. Alongside these antics, Kesha was said to have an odor that some described as like a shrimp on a diaper. Whether exaggerated or not, it was clear that her offbeat behavior extended to her personal hygiene. Thankfully, Kesha has since toned down her wild side, hoping to leave those rougher days behind. Robert Pattinson. Imagine being told someone hasn't showered in weeks. That's what Robert Pattinson reportedly faced during his twilight days. In an interview with Extra, Pattinson admitted he rarely washed back then, questioning the point of shampooing when he didn't care much about being clean. This laissez-faire attitude didn't sit well with everyone on set. MTV News revealed that some crew members weren't thrilled with his hygiene habits. Thankfully, things seem to have improved since those early days, showing that even top stars can evolve and refine their personal routines over time. Kristen Stewart. Interestingly, while Robert Pattinson wasn't too fussed about his hygiene, he allegedly had high standards for his leading lady, Kristen Stewart. According to the National Enquirer, Stewart wasn't the biggest fan of cleanliness, rarely washing her hair and avoiding perfume. She was also said to brush her teeth only once a day. However, stylist revealed a charming twist. Stewart admitted in an interview that Pattinson loves to lick under my armpits. It seems their on-screen chemistry was strong enough to overlook any minor personal quirks, highlighting the unique dynamics that can develop between co-stars. Britney Spears. Britney Spears has faced numerous allegations regarding her personal hygiene over the years, particularly from her former bodyguard, Fernando Flores. In a 2011 lawsuit, Flores claimed that Spears often smelled of stale tobacco due to frequent smoking. He also alleged infrequent bathing, a disinterest in deodorant, and irregular brushing. Adding fuel to the fire, Flores pointed out that Spears was often seen without shoes or socks, even walking barefoot at a gas station in 2004. While these claims paint a less glamorous picture, it's essential to approach them with caution, as they stem from personal grievances rather than official reports. Courtney Kardashian. The Kardashian family is synonymous with beauty and glamour, but even they aren't immune to personal hygiene hiccups. According to Kourtney Kardashian's ex, Scott Disick, there were times when Kourtney's body odor wasn't exactly fresh as a daisy. During their early years together, Kourtney reportedly avoided deodorant, believing it was bad for breastfeeding. This natural approach left Disick less than thrilled, especially when their children were very young. While Kourtney remains a beauty icon, these behind-the-scenes details add a more relatable human element to her public persona. Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe is celebrated for his powerhouse performances in films like Gladiator and A Beautiful Mind. However, he's also been the subject of personal hygiene critiques. Joan Rivers once remarked that she had to position herself downwind of Crowe at award shows to avoid his scent. Additionally, The National Enquirer reported that Renee Zellweger preferred working with a body double during Cinderella Man due to his body odor. While these anecdotes date back to earlier years, they offer a glimpse into the challenges even top actors can face behind the scenes. Megan Fox. Megan Fox might seem like the epitome of Hollywood glamour, but even she has her quirky moments. According to reports, Fox sometimes forgets to flush the toilet, leading to some awkward conversations with friends. While these incidents are more about forgetfulness than hygiene negligence, they highlight that everyone has their off days, even A-list celebrities. Zack Efron. Zack Efron has skyrocketed from High School Musical to major Hollywood roles like The Greatest Showman. Despite his success, rumors suggest his personal hygiene hasn't always kept pace. Star magazine reports that Efron showers only occasionally, relying on baby wipes to stay fresh despite his regular exercise routine. While this might work in a pinch, it's a reminder that even top stars juggle personal habits amidst their busy lives. Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt isn't alone in his reliance on baby wipes. During the filming of *Inglourious Basterds*, director Eli Roth revealed that Pitt often used them to stay clean when he couldn't find time for a full shower. With a busy family life as the father of 6, Pitt found quick fixes essential. While baby wipes can be handy, they're no substitute for a good shower, something even Pitt seems to recognize. Shailene Woodley. Shailene Woodley is known for her stunning looks and eco-friendly lifestyle, but her choice of essential oils has reportedly caused some olfactory challenges. According to Star, her preferred scents can be overpowering, making it difficult for others to spend extended time around her. Designers have even hesitated to let her borrow clothes, fearing her signature scents would linger on their expensive fabrics. Adding to the mix, Woodley has admitted to Parade that she only shampoos her hair once a month to maintain its low-maintenance appeal. While this works for her, it clearly isn't everyone's cup of tea, especially in the high-pressure environment of the red carpet. Harry Styles. Harry Styles, beloved by millions from his One Direction days, isn't exempt from personal hygiene talk. Former bandmate Louis Tomlinson hinted to Sugarscape that Styles can be a bit gassy at times, while Zayn Malik shared with Inquisitor that no amount of money could make them sniff Styles' socks. Even Taylor Swift reportedly wasn't a fan of his breath, attributing it to his drinking habits. Despite these claims, Styles continues to charm fans worldwide, proving that his talent often overshadows any personal quirks. Post Malone. Post Malone might surprise you by addressing rumors about his personal scent. Contrary to fan assumptions, Malone admits to having a natural musk because he doesn't wear deodorant or cologne. When his manager supposedly quit over his smell, the rumor gained traction, with some even jokingly suggesting he joined the reboot of Queer Eye. Matthew McConaughey. While he does shower regularly, Matthew McConaughey admitted in a 2005 interview with People that he doesn't wear deodorant or cologne, preferring to let his own smell roam free. "I don't like to smell like someone or something else. If my smell starts to bother someone else, I'll take a shower." While filming Fool's Gold, his natural smell upset Kate Hudson to the point that she tried to pressure him into at least using salt rocks. She always brings a salt rock, which is some natural deodorant, and says, "Would you please put this on?" I just never wore it. No cologne, no deodorant. But even though his smell may be a bit too much for some people, there's someone that is all right, with taking a whiff of McConaughey.